He knows the truth about John.
He does. Dani's an incredibly strong person. She's also someone who has had really close friendships and close advisors for her entire run of the show. You look at those people who have been closest to her for such a long time, and almost all of them have either turned on her or died, and she's very much alone. And that's a dangerous thing for someone who's got so much power to feel that isolated. So at the very time when she needs guidance and those kind of close friends.
A Targaryen in the world is indeed a bad thing. So today we're going to talk about Game of Thrones will end like Dune. We're of course talk about the Dune series written by Frank Herbert. We're going to also get into why this is the best season of all the Game of Thrones seasons and why Dan and Dave are just awesome producers and directors. And I know a lot of people are are up in arms. They're not going to like that. But I will be willing to debate anybody who is on this subject in the Game of Thrones world. I am quite busy these days. I have several projects going on, but I would be open to a debate against someone to show you where you've all went wrong on this. So first, I want to say this real quick: Game of Thrones. There have been a series of leaks that have been sent out about how it ends. From the title we got, it will end like the Dune series. Now, if you don't want to know the ending, if you're not familiar with the leak so far that's out there that we believe to be pretty much accurate now, then at this time you want to leave and come back at a later time after you've maybe after tomorrow night rather, and watch the video then, and it'll probably be as good then, or as much as relevant then, because you'll be at the end of the series. But so let's talk about why Game of Thrones will end like the Dune series, right? And what's the connection here? So if you don't know what Dune is, we'll give you a real quick crash course in Dune, although you will understand the concept of where we're going with this, whether you know what Dune is or not. But Dune is similar to Game of Thrones, where there are these noble houses in war with each other. And the only thing is it takes place in the future, right? And in another world, right? But the political intrigue in the series is very similar to Game of Thrones. In fact, so much so that the Dune series was written in the 60s, I believe. And the thing about it is Dune has been the inspiration for a lot of sci-fi genres after that point. So much so people think that it greatly inspired Star Wars, particularly with the Luke and Leia, the twins, right? There are twins in Dune. And so why we're able to connect the dots with this and say it's going to end like Game of Thrones is because at this point in time, if you go with the theory that's out there now that Bran becomes king of Westeros, and again we're going on that because the leaks that have come out so far have been very accurate, and they have come up with very particular details that let us know there's somebody who actually has a copy of the script or something. But anyway, they say in it Bran ends up king. Now, this relates a great deal to Dune, as many of you all probably know throughout the Dune series, because Bran in the Game of Thrones series, Bran is some type of super being, right? He has supernatural abilities. He can see into the past and the future and a variety of things. He can warg in animals, and he can do things other human beings can't do, making him not a human being, but something else, as he keeps saying, I am something else. I'm not a man, really. I'm some being. Now, interesting enough, in the Dune series, there exists a being that is very similar to Bran. They refer to as the Kwisatz Haderach. And this is a super being. This is with a very similar start to like Bran. They both come from noble houses and have a pretty normal life in the very beginning, yet their abilities kind of start to overlap throughout the course of their lives, and they start to notice that there's something different about them, although they don't know what it is. And in the Dune series, the character Paul Atreides, who hails from a noble house that's worn in a galaxy with other noble houses, and a lot of backstabbing and plots within plots, plans within plans, much like Game of Thrones trying to vie for control over. In the Game of Thrones series, it's the Iron Throne. In the Dune series, it's the Spice Melange, which is this that gives them, that enhances their consciousness, right? And it makes them more like what Bran is, having the gift of green sight and a variety of things, been a green seer. But in the same like fashion, the political system of Dune, you know, they make a decision that is probably the most logical decision, right? Is to have the person who has all these abilities running the political system. And with the leaks in Game of Thrones, that seems to be the way they're going, right? Because Bran becomes king. Who better than, who can see the future and all outcomes to lead than him? Same thing happens with Paul in the Dune series, right? So these are very similar characters. That's why we're making the connections that they're in. They're both very good books as well. Both expressed by some to be hard to adapt into film or television. Whereas, you know, Game of Thrones, I think, did it well, and even like the Dune television show and the Dune movie. Some people didn't like it. I thought it was pretty good. But that's how we get to this place, and the party issue in trying to understand why it ends like Dune and why I consider it great writing, whereas a lot of people don't. And I'm making a case for it. Was within Dune, the idea is the choices that are made, he calls it the golden path, right? Where he has to make a tough choice, and I'm not going to go in deep into detail about it, but the choices that are made are basically the what plays out throughout history is kind of similar to what you get with Avengers, what you got with Doctor Strange, where they keep going back into the past and in the future, and they see multiple outcomes, and the outcome that has the best case scenario, they have to pick that one, even though it might be drastically different from what they thought it would be or want it to be. So the point I'm making is, where some have said, well, Bran, why would Bran want to be king? He's not the Lord of Winterfell. He's not anything. I believe the writing's good, and I believe what they're going for in that idea and how Bran character has worked up to this point is that in Bran becoming king, that is the best scenario for Westeros, right? And probably the world. So Bran makes that choice similar to what happens in the Dune series for the people, for the good of the people, for the good of the realm, right? And so that makes a lot of sense to me that they would go that route with it, and why Bran would take that. Not because he has some power, you know, some thirst for power to where it's just a good idea, you know, something he wants to do. No, he would be making that choice because all of the other scenarios were wrong when he wasn't king, right? If that makes sense. And so I think Dan and Dave are tapping into that, and that's why I think this is shaping up to be the best ending to Game of Thrones, and why I think the writing's gonna make sense, even though some people have had a problem with it up until now. I think we also have to keep in mind that the book to television adaptation, you know, for many reasons, they couldn't be exactly the same as the books. But sometimes when something is based on a novel or a book, it doesn't have to be exactly like the book. I mean, I think at this point in time, we've taken, Dan and Dave have given enough honor to A Song of Ice and Fire to get the basic layout. And once they did that, you know, it's not necessary for it to end like how George R. Martin's going to write it. And I get the idea that you don't just destroy an entire plot to do that, but I don't think they've even destroyed the entire plot. I thought they've pretty much laid enough of the skeleton in the ground structure. I know a lot of people go, well, what about all these prophecies and setup and plots? Well, sometimes just like in real life, things get set up and they go nowhere. I'll give you a idea of what what I mean exactly. Remember in the first season of Game of Thrones, right? Ned Stark and Jon Snow are riding off. He's headed to the wall, and Ned Stark is headed to King's Landing with Robert Baratheon, and Jon Snow's asking him about his mom. He said, well, when we meet again, I'll tell you, I promise, because Jon's gonna be safe at the wall, and he will be he won't be able to be killed by Robert Baratheon. But that goes nowhere, right? Because because Ned dies, that's the end of that. And so some plots just just like what happens in real life, people set up to do things and they don't come true. If you want to get into the prophecy part, we had Melisandre, making prophecies that didn't come true all throughout the course of the show. A lot of things didn't go any place. In Quaif, in Karth, rather, Quaif. I guess she was supposed to be Quaif in the show with the letter of mass, right? Some of you all who read the books are probably familiar with her, but she's coming up to Jorah and she's speaking with Jorah, and there's all of this about how do you feel about Dany, and that goes absolutely nowhere. We don't know why he was talking to her or why he was and what that was all about. So that moves on. So it's something I like about the art of that, right? I know a lot of you are looking at like it's just lazy writing or it's just something left, that they didn't get back to with the plot because they didn't know what to do with it. I don't think that was it. I'm kind of seeing an art in this, right? Of just kind of leading you there and going nowhere, kind of like the Winchester Mansion that had doors that led to nowhere. Maybe there's a type of poetic justice in that. Just something to think about. Let's see. Let's get a little specific into episode 5. So people, of course they hated episode 3. Some they hated episode 4 as much, and some people hated episode 5. I thought they were all great writing, but let's just focus on a few details about what happened in episode 5. Maybe some I missed because I already did the apologetics video. You can watch that, and it touches on some of these things. But some of the things I didn't get on in detail was some people complained that Cersei just stood watching everything from the balcony, sipping wine the whole time, and she didn't do anything, and they had a problem with that. I like that too, because and then just her doing that in her state of delusion about what was going to happen. A character like Cersei or a mindset like Cersei, I thought that kind of works because I would find a person like her quite delusional, how she was in that, and then becoming quite human at the end and saying she wants to live and begging to stay alive. These traits are very realistic to me, to what happens to bullies and tyrants and people that are cowards, right? And I don't identify with people. These people do things like that, right? And they die undignified. So I think that's very telling with dictators and tyrants and people who make those decisions, that these aren't people of honor or brave people, that they do go out this way. Now, going to the Arya scene, people speak a lot about, they talk a lot about how Arya was this, this big badass killer. And at the end, she just kind of went, okay, I'm fine. I don't want to do this after the Hound gives her a talk. Well, first of all, that scene was very significant because when the Hound gives her that talk, the Hound doesn't usually speak with you like that, right? He's never cared about anybody, or let on that he did throughout the entire series. So that's a very intimate scene with him and Arya. He's letting Arya know, hey, look, you're like the daughter I never had. You're probably the only person in the world that I love. And that we see that true because he even gets over his fire scare, right, to try to go save Arya. But also in Arya's character, he lets her go to the King's Landing with him to really see, what the outcome of the situation is going to be, right? But Arya was always basically leading back to her human side of Arya and getting off that assassin train anyway. We see areas of that all throughout the series, right? With her just can't make that final move to be a faceless person, right? Not getting rid of Needle. All of the, all of the things when she sees John, she jumps back to Arya, and not really fully wanting to leave Arya in the North and in her home and her family, right? So Arya's always been backing away from being the bad assassin, right? And she does save Bran right in the end, and and things like that. And people didn't like that. But again, I would say that's just one of them plots where it didn't necessarily have to go anywhere. We just wanted it to go that way. Another thing is a lot of people are a little bit put off by the writer too, because they want it to be exactly like the books, right? So a lot of people who read the books are so great, and the books are really good, and many people agree the books are better than the TV show. But the TV show is its own thing on its own, right? And it's got the structure and the basis of the books. But a lot of people are just upset because it doesn't follow the books. If we were watching Game of Thrones without the books, this would be the best thing you ever saw in the world. But it's because you're comparing it directly to the books that you have this issue with it, right? And I kind of touched on Dany already a little bit. I'll just go real quick with Dany and King's Landing. There's the what people feel was this sudden change in her attitude about burning the city down. But Daenerys had been getting out of touch with herself for a long time throughout the series. There was a scene before she left, what was it, Marine, and she was saying how much she didn't care about Dario, and she doesn't have much feelings for anything anymore. And she was kind of, in other words, the main thing that was becoming her focus was the Iron Throne. It was the only thing really left for her, because she was losing everyone, right? She lost everything. She had lost Jorah, at least she thought she did. She'd lost her family. It was taken from her during Robert's Rebellion. And it was nobody really she could trust. Everybody who got a chance betrayed her. It's just brought out inside the episode, right? So at this point, with the last betrayal, which is Jon going and telling everybody that he's a Targaryen, which I think symbolically still is Jon wanting to step in that role, although he keeps saying, I don't want it. I don't buy it. I don't buy that Jon doesn't feel this some other pull of destiny that is pulling him to that this is something I gotta be. He is by his honor and loyalty kind of locked into this pact he's made with Daenerys. But for the most part, his destiny is yanking at him. He wants to fulfill that destiny, whatever it is or whatever he's supposed to be doing in his mind. And so he tells Sansa, and he tells Arya, and he tells him, he knows it's dangerous, it can get out, and it gets out. But for Dany, that's the last betrayal. Now she doesn't have anybody left, right? The Westerosis are as foreign to her. They're foreign people to her. She doesn't know them, and she's never been amongst them. Now, I think at this point with Dany, after all the betrayal and her progression onto destiny and the means justifies the end, is that Dany start to follow what I believe to be the natural progression of a sociopath, right? A sociopath doesn't necessarily arrive a sociopath in a second. There's a series of events that could lead up to that. If we go back in her history, even remember this, in the mind of the sociopath, he's not bad. So if you think about Dany doesn't see herself as bad. She might see herself as burning down the city of people who will never accept her as their ruler. And because they will never accept her as her ruler, these will be the very people in the very armies that will dethrone her. Now you might say that's bad, and I know it sounds bad to go and just then jump to the conclusion to go and burn and destroy all these people. Sounds real bad. It sounds horrible, and it is. But in the mind of a sociopath, which is what Danny's become, those people dying in King's Landing are nothing compared to a kingdom. Similar to the statement that Stannis Baratheon made, what's the kingdom to a bastard, right? Speaking about Gendry, when he was saying Gendry should be killed in order to usher in his rulership that will fight off the White Walkers, do all these things. In contrast that to Daenerys, Daenerys is basically saying that her reign will be about going to end in all slavery and all suffering of millions of other people, not just the people in King's Landing, and that these people are opposition to that in King's Landing, right? So she's going to just shape a whole nother world. And in the mind of the sociopath she's become, the end justifies the mean, burn the old world to create a new one, right? With people that are loyal to her. And that wasn't the people in King's Landing in her mind. The dragon fire, that came up a lot in the episode. They said that was bad writing. Do you know that concrete can only stand about 400 degrees before it explodes? It actually starts to explode. That's why, like in my fireplace, we have to use fire bricks and a variety of things. So you get like an explosion. Now, from what we know about dragon fire, certain weapons like Valyrian steel has to be forged in dragonfire. Maybe there's a certain temperature and heat that dragonfire reaches that is far beyond a normal fire that can be created, right? So Drogon's fire, and then Drogon's just focusing full blast. Maybe that fire is getting hotter and hotter. It's just blowing walls down, right? But people were saying, well, you know, it's not been that destructive before, you know. Well, you know, just like you push a Mustang to the limit. Maybe Danny was pushing Drogon to the limit. That's putting your feet on the accelerator and going faster. This is the best season, the best writing in Game of Thrones history. I debate anybody on it. I debate all you big Game of Thrones YouTubers. Come at me. I'm ready for you. And I will win. I will defeat you all, just like Arya defeated that Night King. But before I get out of here, what else is the I think that you guys had some problems with in the writing that you just thought was, you know, ridiculous. I think the rest of it you didn't hit too bad. You know, I kind of touched on the Varys betrayal in the apologetics video that, hey, you know, we talking about Varys here, you know, Varys is too dangerous to keep alive. You know, I think anybody for any ruler would find him too dangerous to keep alive. The Clegane Bowl, did anybody have a problem with that? I think I touched on Clegane Bowl. I thought Clegane Bowl was fine. I thought it was epic in the end, how it looked with him fighting and getting to the end. That some people say, well, why wasn't it important for Sandor to go there in the beginning and take on, you know, why did he wait to write the perfect timing at the end of that? Well, there was a time for everything, and I think I don't really see that was a big problem in the writing. And I think that's about it. But guys, if you get to watch this video, leave in the comment section something I missed that you thought was just a ridiculous scene, you know, as far as the character development is involved. I thought it showed enough time for us to get the basic gist. You know, these television shows are, you know, only an hour long, and the history of Westeros, you know, goes years. So, so sometimes you do have to speed up the plot a little bit, similar to what we get when certain people are exposed to certain radiation on superhero shows. The radioactive effects may take years, but, you know, they got to get to the end of this episode. So there are certain practical reasons certain things have to be done. But I think it was enough setup with Daenerys to do what she did at the end. Jon Snow, I might have missed that. Some people thought Jon Snow was kind of just standing back. Again, I think that was based on his loyalty to Daenerys and just trying to honor that, yet being caught up in a moment of shock when he started to really see what was going on there and having to react now in a very difficult situation. But that's all I want to say in this video, guys. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions about it. Tell me what you think. And until next time, take care.